The greatest of storms begin with the raindrop. The greatest of all changes begin with a mere thought. The greatest of all changes begin with a ripple. In fact, I'd like to believe that in a single lifetime, ripples rather than change are possible. In the beginning of last month, the city of Delhi saw a ripple. A group of 12 motley poets, as I like to call them, fearlessly took over the stage at an international spoken word poetry slam to tell their stories of truth and hope. They used juxtaposition, they used allegory, they used all of the literary devices to talk about things that were important to them, from female feticide to their dreams for their country. They later said that writing and speaking poetry helps them to find their voice. Somewhere in this country, there's a child sitting under the streetlight next to a flyover. Take the exit from the circle, walk another kilometer. There's another child squatting outside a one-bedroom tarpaulin tent. And this is not the first time that it isn't a game of pirates and tents. Cross two houses, take a turn. There's a park bench that's home to a family of two, an orphan and a stray dog, smelling like city smoke and scars. What is common in all these stories is a smile that seems to forget how to say what they really feel like. It was 2.5 years ago that I convinced my 22-year-old self to take a decision that would change my entire life. I joined the fellowship at Teach for India and started teaching 50 bundles of all kinds of emotions in a low-income classroom in the community of Tughlakabad Extension in Delhi. It was there, probably more than my own years as a student, that I realized that in classrooms centered on mastering the art of memorization, a never-ending race for marks was overtaking the everlasting desire to create. Day in and day out, our children are consumers of TV, of internet, and even literature. Where are children as creators? And what about their voice? It's a big question mark. We live in the times of the global deprioritization of the arts, and our dreams, especially for children from low-income communities, are limited to academic outcomes and the security of employment. But for children who've never seen open doors to voicing their opinions, telling their stories, weaving their words into metaphors to imagine a world of self-aware and empowered adults seems next to impossible. I know that I come from a country where our very socio-economic fabric is twisted into the buckets of the haves and the have-nots. And yet I believe something as fundamental as finding one's voice, being able to express oneself, should not be limited to the privileged class. What is the issue that we're really talking about here? For children who cannot decide the circumstances of their birth, for children who cannot decide their religion, and the list goes on and on and on, the issue is the lack of the ability to say yes, the lack of the ability to say no, the lack of the ability to say anything at all. We've made our children to hold back so much that they now hold back from living, from seeking, from believing. The absence of a battle doesn't imply the lack of problems. It only means that we haven't learned to see any better. The question remains, who gives them their voice? This is Chandra. She's smiling right now, and she smiles during her poems. But in all seriousness, once she said something that has made a lasting impact on me. There are poets filled with poems, but still something is missing. The problem with poets, Chanda says, is that they do not use their art for a greater purpose. Poetry can be used in classrooms to learn, to gather knowledge. And if you don't believe me, let's have an example of it right here, right now. Write a poem with me. I invite you to do that. Let's all choose emotions. One emotion that we connect to right now. Right? The emotions can be happiness, anger, sadness, excitement, euphoria, any emotion. Choose an emotion in your head. Take 10 seconds to choose your emotion. When you're done choosing your emotion, give me a snap like this. Alright, so many of you have already chosen your emotions. Lovely. The first line of your poem has to have your emotion and an is attached with it. So, I choose the emotion of love. And the first line of my poem becomes, hence, love is. Now, I'd like you to think of a color that you associate most with your emotion. As you do that, I'll do the process for myself as well. When I do workshops for children, they come up with colors like green, blue, orange, yellow for love. Sometimes as an adult, I get restricted to choose between red and pink for love, and I choose pink. So my color is pink. If you've all chosen your color, give me a snap again. Lovely. Now think of something which really brings that color alive for you. So if it is pink, children usually give me the responses of lotus, Didi your lips, Didi your cheeks, many responses like that. And I ask them to think that they're walking on the street and there's this little very cute puppy that comes walking to them. And the puppy opens his mouth. There's his tongue. Is it pink?
Yes.
Is it really, really pink? Yeah? So love is as pink as a little puppy's tongue. For your emotion and for your color, think of an object that brings your color alive and make your second line. When you're done making your second line, put your hands on your heads. Perfect. All right, let's move to the next line. And now we'll play with some sounds, right? I want you to show me your hands like this, jazz hands. Yeah, perfect. Take a small pinky finger. Yeah. I'm going to make you listen to the sound which reminds me of love. And we'll all think of the sounds that remind us of the emotion that we chose for the poem. Okay? Let's start tapping our pinky finger on our hand. Close your eyes. Start using the second finger. Be a little louder with your finger. Yeah. Start using the third finger. Close your eyes. I can see those who not close their eyes. Fourth finger. Fifth finger. All right, open your eyes. It sounded like applause in the end, but it wasn't really applause. You all know that. It was the sound of raindrops. I grew up in Dharamshala, where it rains almost all the time. And now that I live in Delhi, I miss the rain so much that every time it rains, I'm reminded of love. It sounds like the pitter-patter of the rain. Think of one sound that connects to your emotion and build your poem. When you're done building your poem, give me a beautiful smile, the best smile you have. Now I can see so many smiling faces. Imagine if teachers and poets put their powers together and used tools of art as a means to learn in the classroom. Imagine if they chose to build a world where every child would find their voice. Imagine them building leadership, expression, and mindfulness in children through using the arts. And not just poetry, using all of the arts. A big question that a lot of people ask me. And its response starts with an eye roll and generally ends with the poem that we just did. Is it art for Shakespeare and Picasso lovers and philosophers and overly sentimental people? Well, as a child, I woke up to Ghalib's verses playing on the tape recorder every single morning. दिल ही तो है न संगो खिश्त दर्द से भर नाए क्यों. It is a heart and not a stone. It wells up with sadness. And why not? I don't know where I'd be without that ghazal. But when I see Preeti talk about women in her poems, I see what art belongs to everyone really looks like. We need to break that halo that hovers around the head of artists, because arts for expression is no longer an elitist movement. Something that makes someone valuable to the world is their opinion, their point of view, and arts help us to express that. It's the greatest magic of finding our voice, and every individual has the capacity to find their voice. I will now show you a video of my 12 little poets as they experience finding their voice with poetry.
ये दुनिया है हरी भरी, इसमें कई उलझन खड़ी, हर उलझन का हल होता है, लेकिन धर्म का मतलब क्या होता है? किसान एक मसीहा, देता हजारों जिंदगी, नहीं समझते लोग इन्हें, कर देते बोझ और बड़ा, खूब बातें ये पसीना, और लोग ना पूछे इनका पसीना. छोटू एक कप चाय ला. इस साल दिवाली में कुछ ज्यादा ही पटाखे हैं बनाने को. मुन्नी ये साड़ियाँ दोपहर तक चाहिए कढ़ाई के साथ, जल्दी हाथ चला. अरे ये देखो, ये जूते अभी तक गंदे हैं, कैसे साफ कर रहे हो? बच्चा ठीक से साफ करना, ऐसे साफ करना जिसमें शक्ल दिख जाए. धरती रानी तुम तो हो बड़ी सियानी, तुम तो हो बहुत बहादुर, तुम तो हो बहुत हिम्मत वाली, तुम कभी न रोती कभी न हारती, कष्टों में तुम खुल के मुस्कुराती, फिर भी धरतीवन तुम क्यों दुखी. The poem that closes my heart is Dharti in Oxygen.
Why?
Because it was my first poem, and like when I wrote that poem, like many ideas, like the first poem was my like about all feeling I describe in that, but now in poems like I write poem usually on issue, like so that was that poem contained like happiness, sadness, so that's why I wrote that poem.
या खुदा तूने बुला लिया उन्हें, क्या मालूम नहीं था तुझे कि जो चले गए वो मेरे थे. ये लिखने का मैंने ऐसे सोचा कि one day we were studying a chapter of history, so in that what we were telling that एक farmer जब अपने खेत को मतलब उगाता है, इतने सपने के साथ उगाता है कि अभी मेरे पास ये प्रॉब्लम है, बट कोई बात नहीं, मेरी मेहनत रंग लाएगी और एक दिन ये जो उथल पुथल हो रही है ना जिंदगी में, वो एक दिन उग जाएगी. एंड बट सडनली समथिंग हैपन जिसकी वजह से सब कुछ तहस नहस हो गया. वो जो फार्मर बैठ के मतलब इतनी परेशानी में, जब उससे खाना भी नहीं मिल रहा था, वो सोचा था कि मेरा खेत मुझे हेल्प करेगा, बट वैसा नहीं हुआ. उसके आंखों के सपने, झलक, एवरीथिंग जो उसने सोच रखा था सब चला गया.
These are the hands that move like clockwork, so you are on time. Hands like these that are invisible, they walk so things can walk out for you. Getting your tea, your designer wear, and your Diwali firecrackers. Taking home burning lungs and neatly packaged like jewels. For me, the happiest memory in Jam Out Loud is that when we went Kullu together, we all for that trip, and Bangalore, because over there we spent 5 days together and we got to know each other, because before we didn't know each other. So we really liked that we are together, and we wrote poems, we like tracked, did so many things, like so many fun things which really like made us feel that we are in some another world, and we were really enjoying those days.
बोल से बनती कविता, कविताएं बने इंसान, आओ मिलकर कविताओं से बनाए बेहतर और नया जहान. शुक्रिया.
Thank you. Before I talk about Anjali, let's debrief the poem that we did a little bit and what the children are doing. When you all wrote that poem today, one of the things that you experienced, the first thing that you experienced, that your choices were not bound by the constraints of being right or wrong. All emotions were right. The second, imagination. When you had to think about colors and make connection, your imagination was sparked, right? Think of what it does to children. The third thing, expression. Being able to express yourself. Using art as a self-satisfying and self-justifying end in itself. All these things happened when you were writing that poem and when all these children wrote the poems that they wrote. Now let's come back to Anjali. Anjali, whose eyes refuse to accept things as they are, whose eyes refuse to stop shining. Anjali, I entered this community looking at so much scarcity around, but Anjali taught me the meaning of abundance. Last year, Anjali decided to help other children in her community to start finding their voice as she found her own voice. In this life, we cannot do great things. We can only do small things with great love. I think about Anjali, and I think about how we cannot love our children greatly until we give them spaces that give them a voice, that no longer treat them as unfortunates. In spaces where children feel that they get unconditional positive regard and they have a voice, they create success for themselves and replicate it. Children feel so empowered by our love that they are able to achieve anything. Going back to the sound of Delhi traffic after an SOL workshop is almost like breaking out of the dream. In these times of climate instability, when the researchers call sun or a mountain a natural resource that has to be exploited in the best ways possible, I think about Pooja and her ways of engaging with the world, and they remind me that mountains and lakes are not items on a document. When Zanu in Sikkim speaks fondly of her dog, who sleeps like a log, and Kashmiri Nusrat, who is only 8 years old, says that anger is the emotion she connects to most, I've unlearned about perspective. How being with children and hearing their voice has changed my life. If I try to explain that, it's an effort in futility. I only know, like Emily Dickinson said, that sometimes I look at a word and it begins to shine. Let us all join our head, hearts, and hands to collaborate and create ripples in the young minds we touch upon by giving them an art, a mic, a pen, a ball, so that they can claim their voice and accept the voice of others. Only then can we say to them, as Faiz Ahmed Faiz said, बोल, बोल कि थोड़ा वक्त बहुत है, जिस्मो जुबां की मौत से पहले. बोल कि सच जिंदा है अब तक. बोल, जो कुछ कहना है कह ले. शुक्रिया.